September 1st, 1943. At Rabaul Airfield, Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's few remaining aces, scanned a new intelligence report. The words made him laugh out loud in the humid operations tent. The Americans, it stated, had produced a new carrier fighter, a behemoth they called the Hellcat. It was described as heavy as a bomber, wide as a transport, and weighing twice as much as the nimble Zero. Another American failure of design, he concluded. One more clumsy machine doomed to fall before the sleek, deadly precision of Japan's legendary A6M Zero. Sakai and the other naval aviators gathered that morning believed in the mathematics of their supremacy. What they did not know was that this seemingly failed fighter would, in exactly 30 days, begin the systematic industrial annihilation of Japanese naval aviation. The F6F Hellcat would go on to achieve an astonishing 19-to-1 kill ratio, destroying 5,223 enemy aircraft while losing only 270 in aerial combat. The era of the warrior pilot was about to be ended by the efficiency of a machine designed by engineers, not samurai. For 2 years, the Mitsubishi Zero's confidence had been justified by undeniable facts. The Mitsubishi Zero had rewritten the rules of fighter design, achieving its miraculous performance through a ruthless philosophy. Every ounce sacrificed for maneuverability and range. The aircraft was built with a classified aluminum alloy, making its structure 30% lighter than comparable American designs. It carried no armor plate to protect the pilot, had no self-sealing fuel tanks to save weight, and often flew without a radio. This ascetic design produced an aircraft that could outturn and outrange anything the Allies possessed. As Warrant Officer Hiroshi Nishizawa, Japan's ace of aces, described it, flying the Zero was like wearing wings, while American planes flew like clumsy trucks, powerful but wasteful. The first reports of the F6F Hellcat reaching Japanese intelligence in early 1943 seemed to confirm this philosophical gulf. The Hellcat weighed in at over 12,000 pounds loaded, while the Zero weighed less than 6,000. The American fighter carried over 200 pounds of armor plating protecting the pilot, a heavily protected oil system, and self-sealing fuel tanks holding 250 gallons. The tactical genius who had planned Pearl Harbor, Captain Minoru Genda, reviewed the specifications and was dismissive. This Hellcat, he concluded, was merely a continuation of America's failed philosophy, attempting to overcome a lack of pilot skill with machinery and weight. The math was on his side. The Zero's low wing loading suggested a turning radius of 612 feet. The Hellcat's high wing loading implied a radius over 900 feet. In a turning fight, the cornerstone of Japanese tactics, the Hellcat would be helpless. The first pilot to encounter the Hellcat was Petty Officer First Class Yoshio Fukui near Marcus Island on September 30, 1943. He spotted 6 dark blue shapes climbing from the southeast. His initial thought was that they were B-25 bombers on a strange heading, but their massive fuselages soon revealed the new fighter. Fukui initiated standard Zero tactics, rolling into a diving turn, expecting the heavy American fighter to continue straight, allowing him to curve onto its tail. Instead, the Hellcat did something unprecedented. It went vertical. The enormous Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine, producing 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero's engine, drove the Hellcat upward at 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui watched his own airspeed decay as his Zero struggled against gravity. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat executed a hammerhead turn that dropped it directly onto Fukui's 6 o'clock. The American opened fire, not with the expected 4 guns, but 6 machine guns. Fukui reported that the volume of fire was unprecedented, his aircraft taking 17 hits in 3 seconds. He escaped only by dropping into a desperate spin. His wingman did not return. The first major confrontation came shortly after at Wake Island. where Lieutenant Yoshiyoshiga led 12 Zeros to intercept an American carrier raid. The Japanese held every tactical advantage: altitude, position, and surprise. But as the Zeros dove, the Hellcats did not scatter or attempt to turn. A maintained formation, accelerating into a gentle dive that kept their speed and energy high. When the Zeros opened fire, the Hellcats simply absorbed the punishment. The pilots' 212 pounds of armor plate, the self-sealing tanks, and the heavy construction allowed them to shrug off the Japanese shells. As the Zeros exhausted their ammunition in diving passes, the Hellcats counterattacked. They refused to dogfight, instead using their weight and immense power to climb away at full throttle, reaching altitudes where the Zero's engines struggled for oxygen. At 25,000 feet, the Hellcat was still producing 1,650 horsepower, while the Zero was down to 900. 8 Zeros were shot down that day. No Hellcats were lost. The Japanese air groups quickly had to unlearn their entire tactical doctrine. As Lieutenant Commander Tao Tanimizu, one of the few surviving aces, explained, the Americans had changed the rules. The Hellcat was not designed to outturn the Zero. It was designed to never need to. Using a combat philosophy called energy fighting, Hellcat pilots maintained speed and altitude, converting potential energy into kinetic energy in lightning-fast slashing attacks. They worked in coordinated pairs, one high, one low, guiding each other with the radios that the Japanese had laughed at for adding weight. Tanimizu explained that while Japanese pilots flew as individual samurai, the Americans fought as a perfectly coordinated machine.
The technological gulf went beyond just horsepower and armor. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida, who had led the Pearl Harbor attack, inspected returning Zeros and calculated the mathematical disparity in firepower. The Hellcat's 650 caliber machine guns delivered 4,500 rounds per minute, each bullet weighing 46 grams and traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The Zero's lighter guns delivered a fraction of that energy. More critically, American pilots were guided to their targets by radar-directed fighter direction from shipboard controllers who could see the Japanese aircraft from 50 miles away. Japanese pilots were blind men fighting those who could see in the dark. This technological superiority coincided with a catastrophic crisis in Japanese pilot training. The rigorous pre-war training, which took 3 years and resulted in pilots with 700 flight hours, had vanished. By 1944, naval pilots were entering combat with only 300 flight hours, often less. Fuel shortages meant training was conducted in gliders, gunnery practice was limited, and critical skills like night flying were eliminated. Meanwhile, American pilots arrived at the front with a minimum of 300 flight hours, including 50 hours in type, having practiced carrier landings until they were automatic, and fired thousands of rounds in training. As one Japanese training officer lamented, they were sending children to fight professionals. The systematic extermination reached its climax during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, known to American pilots as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The Japanese committed their entire remaining carrier force, 9 carriers and 450 aircraft. Against them, the Americans deployed Task Force 58, with 15 carriers and 956 aircraft, nearly half of them Hellcats. When the first Japanese strike launched, Hellcats were vectored into perfect interception positions, stacked from 20,000 to 30,000 feet, waiting like a steel carton. The engagement was a slaughter. In just 12 minutes, the first wave of 69 Japanese aircraft lost 42. By the end of the day, 346 Japanese planes were destroyed, compared to only 30 American fighters. When Saburo Sakai was later asked about the Hellcat, his response captured the totality of its dominance. The Zero had made Japan a great naval power, but the Hellcat made Japan realize it was never as great as it believed. Japanese pilots had laughed at the F6F Hellcat because they failed to understand that every extra pound represented not weakness but the strength of an industrial democracy that could afford to protect its pilots and build a superior, technologically advanced system. By the time they understood, their laughter had turned to final letters home. The Hellcat hadn't just defeated the Zero, it had destroyed an entire philosophy of warfare, proving that, in modern combat, the nation that could build the better system would destroy the nation that could only build better warriors.